quick? Yes, it is. Let's talk very quickly about terms implied in fact. And because I love yous, I'm just going to summarise the important points that come out of the BP refinery case, because I want you to start with these terms and then we will look at what these tests, the test is for a term that's implied in fact, and compare it with the test, terms implied in law. So basically, and these come from a really old case called the Warcock, but the relevant authority here is BP Refinery. In order for a term to be implied in fact, the term needs to be reasonable and equitable. It needs to be a fair term. It can't be significantly weighted towards one party or another. It needs to be a term that's necessary to give business efficacy to the contract. It needs to be so obvious that it goes without saying. And let's face it, they haven't said it. They expect, the parties need to expect that that term is implied into the contract regardless. It needs to be capable of clear expression. So it can't be something that requires pages and pages to write down. It's something that is clear and unambiguous. And first of the negative ones here, it can't contradict any express term of the contract. So in other words, when you've got a term that would ordinarily, so it's very similar to a term implied in custom, would ordinarily be in the contract. If the contract actually says, in this case, we're not going to do that, we're not going to sell. So let me use an example. Contracts for the sale of wool. We'll talk about a number, like bales of wool. It's an implied term of those contracts, usually, that a bale will be a standard size bale. I don't know what a standard size bale is. It's to do with weight. They're wrapped in a certain way. They're packed in a certain way. And it goes without saying, if you are buying wool, that you're not just getting a big bag that's just arrived that hasn't been packed down and wrapped in a particular way. You don't need usually to have those words in the contract. If you want to do something different with it though, so it'll talk about bales, are usually talk about bales and then the grade of the wool. If you're looking for something different, you are expecting free fleece that has only just come straight off the shearing floor, then your contract needs to say so. So it can overwrite the contract that's implied by fact. So key case here is Byrne and Australian Airlines. And again, this is one of those frustrating ones that in order to explain what a term implied in fact is, I'm going to show you a case where the court found that there was no term implied in fact. So Byrne and his mate Mr. Frew were baggage handlers. And basically baggage went missing. They were accused of stealing the bags and they were fired, and they were fired immediately. So this is, if any of you do employment law or industrial relations, you'll probably come across this case as well. Mr. Byrne and Mr. Frew said, well, that's not fair, really. There's an implied term in our contract that you'll be reasonable about when you fire us. And also, there's an award that says that too, and the industrial award trumps the employment contract that we have anyway. And so if you're not reasonable, you have to pay a financial penalty. Big disclaimer here, not an employment lawyer. I know plenty of really awesome employment lawyers and I immediately handball because it is a fraught and over-regulated area, or possibly, well, take of that what you will. So we were in this situation here. So the question is, as a matter of fact, was there an implied term, that a clause in the agreement that allowed the employment contract to be terminated would only be applied reasonably? So that's the question. Sorry, I think I've got a summary here. So Justice McHugh and Justice Gummo, they said the term needed to be necessary for the reasonable or effective operation of the contract in the circumstances of the case. And so to imply a term that they would only exercise a term acting reasonably actually wasn't necessary for the effective operation of the contract. Further, they said, well, if the parties had turned their mind to it, they would never have agreed a term that said that anyway. So they've looked objectively at the whole of the situation and said, well, actually, as a matter of fact, that is not something that I can imagine these guys actually agreeing. So the point here is around efficacy, not reasonableness. So terms implied in fact only work if the implication is necessary for it to make sense, for something to happen. So the objective background in this case was also admissible in order to ascertain whether it's necessary to give business efficacy to a contract. So there was a separate question about the interrelationship between the award and the contract, which isn't relevant to what we're saying now. The other thing to look at here is the test works differently between an informal contract and a formal contract. So where the parties have not reduced the agreement to writing or even discussed and expressed terms, then the 5-point test that I started with from BP will be much less rigidly applied. And the efficacy or the reasonableness of the implied term is really the most important concern. So I'm going to stop there because I don't want to go on to the next one and leave you